Good morning, guys. So, I have an assistant here today, which you may remember, Mr. Adam. And the reason he is here is because I have laryngitis. My voice goes in and out. Sometimes I'm talking and we don't hear a thing. So, he's actually going to be doing the lesson for me today, and I'm here to make sure that he does it okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to him now.
Hey, good morning. Like always, we're going to set up our worship area first. Put your tea light and cross on the green cloth. Now take a few minutes to quiet down your thoughts. Maybe say a little prayer, do some deep breathing, and let's get ready to learn. A few weeks ago, we had a lesson where we talked about hospitality. It was the lesson that centered on Abraham welcoming the 3 visitors to his camp and how they shared that Sarah would have a baby. Now we have another story that talks about how important it is to welcome guests. God tugs at Rebekah's heart. How do you welcome guests to your home? Do you invite them to sit down? Do you offer something to drink or eat? Listen for how Rebekah and her family welcomed a stranger. Rebekah lived with her family in a city. Each night before dinner, it was her job to get water from the city well. One night, Rebekah went to the well with other women from the city. She carried her big water jar on her shoulders, and after she filled her jar with water, she saw a stranger praying to God. The man looked up from his prayer and saw Rebekah. "Please," he asked, "may I have a sip of your water?" "Of course," Rebekah said kindly. "Drink all you want, and I will go and get water for your camels too." Rebekah ran back to the well. She filled her jar again and again until every animal had water. Then Rebekah invited the stranger to join her for family dinner. Before they ate, the man said, "I have something amazing to tell you. I work for a man called Abraham. He is part of your family. Abraham and his wife Sarah followed God far from here. When they were very old, they had a baby named Isaac. Now Isaac is all grown up. Abraham sent me here to find someone for Isaac to marry. I was asking for God's help at the well. That's when I saw Rebekah. I know she is the one for Isaac." Rebekah's family thought about how far away Rebekah would be if she agreed to marry Isaac. But Rebekah's family felt God tugging on their hearts. They agreed that God was calling Rebekah to marry Isaac. The man begged the family to send Rebekah with him the very next day. Rebekah's family said, "This is a big decision, and only Rebekah can decide." So they called Rebekah and asked her, "Do you want to go with this man? Do you want to marry Isaac?" Rebekah thought about the journey she would take. Rebekah wondered what this man called Isaac was like, but Rebekah felt God tugging at her heart. She said, "Yes, I will go." Early the next morning, Rebekah began her long journey to her new home. She was riding a camel when she saw a man walking in the fields. "Who is that man?" she asked. "That man is Isaac." The man who worked for Abraham introduced Rebekah to Isaac. Then he told Isaac everything that had happened. Isaac married Rebekah, and he loved her. Rebekah was glad that God had tugged on her heart. She loved Isaac. They comforted each other when they were sad. They cared for each other when they grew old. We've talked a lot this year about God's covenant or promise to Abraham, that he would be the father of a great nation. Now we are seeing that when God made that promise, he also made it to Abraham's children. In this story, God is still working on that promise by helping Abraham's servant find a suitable wife for Isaac. Back in Bible times, welcoming guests or practicing hospitality was one of the most important things people could do for each other. Travelers, like Abraham's servant, depended on being welcomed into others' homes when they needed to be cared for or to rest. In this story, you have a servant that is being sent to a faraway land to find a wife for his master's son. That's a really big task, isn't it? I'm sure that this servant wanted to make sure that he picked just the right woman for Isaac. So what did the servant do? He prayed to God. He trusted that if he asked for God's help, God would help him with this important job. And God did. He put Rebekah right in front of the servant. We keep hearing the words, tugged at the heart, spoken over and over again in this story. That is a writing technique called repetition, and it is used to make sure that the reader understands that the repeated part, in this case, tugged at the heart, is a really important part of the story. We learned that Rebekah's family was worried about sending her far away with a stranger, but that something tugged at their hearts. Rebekah was also worried about the trip and leaving all of her loved ones, but something tugged at her heart. Something kept pulling all of them towards agreeing to what sounded like a crazy plan, letting their daughter go off with a stranger to who knows where to marry a man she had never met. What or who do you think was tugging at all those hearts and encouraging Rebekah to follow that tug? It was God. Even today, we can feel tugs at our hearts. That's a way that God talks to us and lets us know that a decision is a correct one. We can always trust that God will be with us in our decisions if we pay attention to those tugs. Now, before we move on to our questions for the day, I want to be sure that we talk about one really important part of this story. The fact that Rebekah's family let her make the final decision on whether she could leave with the servant and marry Isaac. While it's normal today for a woman to choose a partner, in Bible times, parents would decide who and when their daughters would marry. That is what we call an arranged marriage. Even though Rebekah was young, her family trusted and loved her enough to make her own decision. Now on to our questions. As always, you can either think your answers in your head, you can draw or write them down in your notebooks or pads, or you can talk about the questions with a brother or sister or other family members if they're watching with you, okay? How does Rebekah show hospitality in this story? What role does hospitality show in the story? Why did Abraham's servant go to that place? How did Rebekah's family feel about the servant's question? What did her family decide to do? What helped Rebekah make her decision? How do we show hospitality today, and why is it important? How might God be calling you to show hospitality towards others? Can you think of anyone you know who might not get to experience welcome and hospitality? Can you do anything to change that for them? In this story, we see that God is continuing his covenant with Abraham through his son Isaac. God also continues this covenant today through all of us. How do you see God's promise in your life today? This week's family activity and box activity is the same thing. In your box is a card game. Go ahead and color and cut out the cards. You will find directions on the third page. Gather together this week and play God Can Do It with your family. Let's close today with a prayer. God, thank you for your covenant which continues today through all of us. Help us show hospitality to all and make good decisions always. Amen.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this today. And hopefully next week when we finish up with Sarah and Abraham's family, I will be able to talk a little better and I won't need Mr. Adam to do this for me. But we are finishing up this section of lessons next week, and we're going to go back to what happened with Abraham's second wife, Hagar, and her son Ishmael. So we're going to finish up this story. And then after that week, we're going to talk to Miss Wendy again, and she's going to be talking about Rebekah and Isaac's sons and what happened with them. So I hope you have a great week, and I hope you're enjoying everything in your life, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, guys.